Hey Google, what is the definition of a loop in flycasting?
According to Flyfishers International. 11. Tailing loop. Loop caused by a concave rod tip path in which the top, fly, leg dips toward and crosses the bottom, rod, leg.
Huh? Hey Google, that was the definition of what exactly? Hey Google, what is the definition of a loop in flycasting?
According to Flyfishers International. 11. Tailing loop. Loop caused by a concave rod tip path in which the top, fly, leg dips toward and crosses the bottom, rod, leg.
People. Bullshit. Did you understand that? No, you didn't. How would you? Today, we're here to talk a little bit about flycasting, optics, and ballistics, and also aesthetics. The thing that flies out of the front of a fly rod has been called a loop and has been made a cult by the fly fishers. This development of the line is a very, mesmerizing and hypnotizing thing, and that guides the vision and the view and angle of perspective on things that just have happened. The developing line is something like a report card of the process, but it comes delayed. That's why I say that loop is a delayed feedback of what just happened, but not the feedback of the process itself, only the effect, not the cause. Fly fishers and flycasting instructors are natural posers. Just let that sit there as it is. And they like to show off with their skills, of course, but if you are not very well informed about what's going on, it's very easy to trick you into this tight loop dogma, and it's very easy to make things appear tighter than they are. I give you an example. If you look at a fly cast from the side, the developing line will look like this. But if you angle that rod tip and that line towards you, you will see how this tightens up, though it doesn't. And the industry, if you pay attention, does this a lot of times, and they fool you into what makes it look like a tight loop only by a matter of perspective. Let me give you an example here by Flip Pallot casting. And he does something else here, that is sticking the tip exactly into the cast, but we talk about that later. For now, I would like to talk about what is really a good cast. How should it look like and how should it not look like? Because the other thing is, if you ask casters, which is the better cast? The one or the tighter loop, the one that looks like this here, or the one that looks like this? Even to that question, you'll get no answers. Hold on, let me check this quickly with Google. Hey Google, what is the difference between a tight loop in flycasting and an open loop?
According to fly fishermen, the path of the rod tip during the casting stroke largely determines loop size and shape. The line follows the rod tip. A relatively straight rod tip path creates a tighter, narrow loop. An arsing rod tip path creates a wider loop.
Now you know. Google says it's about the rod tip path. I say it's about the rod tip path, but it's mainly about controlling the process. If you can't control the process, your loop looks like this here. A little bit. Here are the stop wiggles and here's a round point at the point. And if you can control the cast, you get a very pointy thing at the front. And I personally think that this point here is crucial. And only this point, because here is where the speed happens. The smaller this turnover point is here of the line, the faster this thing will turn over. Again, remember, when you watch casting, it's very easy to be fooled there by rod angle. So pay attention when you watch casting filmed, what angle is it filmed from? A cast that has a pointy tip and a very quiet, undisturbed lower leg of the fly line is, in my opinion, the good cast, the preferable cast. And it is the controlled cast, because it runs far smoother and it shows that the least possible energy input has been made into that cast. Whereas another cast that is round at the front and has a lot of stop wiggle waves here shows that here that cast energy was not released the best possible way due to a stopping movement. And this here are the aftershocks, the after vibrations, funnily called stop waves, while this is not called a wave in fly casting, because this is called a loop. There's another thing to the whole fly casting teachings, and that is the dogma and the corset of AFTMA, which is very restrictive, because it says for a rod of one class, say a rod class 5, you need a line class 5. But how does it affect, how does a line weight affect the shape of the cast? That is a very interesting question, and also, why do so many people struggle with this system? I made you a little de-stickman here explaining the ballistics of a cast a little bit better. We're going to have a watch this here now. And also, we must ask ourselves in that context, where is that line classification system and that thinking of the tightest possible loop coming from? And my answer to that question is the genesis of the AFTMA system. The AFTMA system was designed under the premises to cast the tightest possible loop at all times. And it was made by very good casters only to show off, never with the process in mind that a beginner might be struggling with what the professionals are recommending here. And that's why I personally think the AFTMA system is actually criminal, or sort of criminal, because it's a stiff corset that cages the fly fisher into never generating a feeling for the cast, which is, by the way, also not taught by the classic teachings, because they also say the most difficult thing to communicate and to teach is the feeling of a fly cast. Yeah, welcome to the Cool Caster channel. You're some lucky mother fisher that you found that channel, because here I can explain you how to feel a fly rod. And I can explain you that very crystal clear, and I will, because feeling works through feedback. Can you get feedback during the cast? Can you feel your cast? Obviously not, because I asked this question already a couple of times. How do you feel a fly cast, a fly rod? I never got an answer. And the reason that I never got an answer is that you actually do not know how to feel a fly cast, which is a result of the criminal teachings that AFTMA and the dogma of the tight loop have thrown up in order to cage you and in order to sell you maximum amount of tackle. Chinky ching. It's about the money and not about you becoming a better caster. Okay, so my recommendations are: fish AFTMA and fish the tight loop. Screw it. You don't need it for nothing. The other thing is, when you are watching your casts, how many times can you really see that so-called loop that suddenly becomes a no loop when the line straightens? Where does it begin? Where does it end? Inconsistent crap. How many times when you're making your cast can you see your casts really? I would give a guess, maybe 50% of the time. The other 50% of the time, it's just the light conditions are bad and you can't see that thing. So how can you still cast if you can't see it? I don't know if you've seen the episode about casting in light versus casting in darkness. That deals already with the same kind of a problem. So that optical fixation on the cast won't help you at all, because this is always too late. When you watch that thing or try that thing to watch developing, it's already too late. That's a fact. That's why that feedback from a bad cast can only feed you back into the next cast, which always leads to a delayed loop of running behind the process and not controlling the process ever. Because if you control the process correct, every cast will look the same. Every cast will also look the same. But a similar. Every cast will look a very similar shape with one rod and different line weights. I'll make you hear a little ballistic stickman that shows that. And in order to understand the whole complex of why AFTMA is such a problem for the learner, it is important to understand where this AFTMA thing is exactly coming from and what's the underlying thought and why it has been made and how it has been made and why it especially doesn't help. Because if I look at the knowledge out there, if you ask a caster what is the better loop, what is the better cast, this one here or this one here, you get no answer. If you ask just questions out of the three-dimensional space that fly fishing is, you will notice that all the teachings in fly casting are only two-dimensional. And Michael Repolz, the cool caster, is the first instructor, learner of fly casting in the world who acknowledges that three-dimensionality of a cast and who doesn't fear finding faults in the system, because the whole system, all the teachings in fly casting are only two-dimensional. That means you have been educated from the Flat Earth Society of Fly Casting so far, the brainwashed loop generation. If you look in books of pre-1964 or 1960, you'll not find the word loop. People talk about the bow, people talk about the line unrolling, people talk about the cast, but the loop is a pure made-up thing, not with bad intentions, by the way, but it's a purely made-up thing that has been made up because you see it so easy and it's so easy to explain and but it doesn't reflect the truth, and it also does not help you to learn faster. So that loop is a delayed feedback, and in here we work on direct feedbacks. That's why the rattle trigger, for example, is so important, because the rattles, they will feedback you before the loop happens. So please go out, make yourself a rattle trigger and try it out, and try out what that direct rattle feedback does to your cast. Just go out and play, have a look yourself, and then you see, whee, this is different. This brings change. And it also tightens up your cast. Just go and try it. You will enjoy this tremendously because the three-dimensional fly casting world adds far more fun to the whole game. That rattle trigger will deliver you your first instant feedback of the cast. And when you're already playing with that rattle trigger, close your eyes too. Close your eyes, cast with the rattle trigger, and note how do you feel a fly rod. I thank you very much for watching. Please like and subscribe to the channel, though you might not want to hear every truth you're confronted with here, but this is how learning works, and this is how learning is truly, truly effective. Swallowing frogs. Please do not forget, we don't own the water owns us.